dare you touch that in my house? Get out of my house and take that brat with you. You are absolutely nothing but a worthless, ungrateful maid. Don't you ever dare again. Now pack your pathetic things and leave.
The crystal chandelier in the grand dining room shook as Genevieve Mercer slammed her fist onto the mahogany table. Her face was twisted in pure rage. She was looking down at a terrified 2-year-old girl who had accidentally dropped a tiny plastic toy onto her pristine marble floor. "Get that filthy creature out of my sight," Genevieve screamed. Her voice echoed through the massive mansion. "Your child does not belong here. This is a home for elite society, not a playground for street rats." The girl's mother, Hazel, trembled as she dropped to her knees. She quickly scooped her crying daughter into her arms. Hazel was the live-in maid, and she had nowhere else to go. She braced herself for the worst, knowing she was about to be thrown out into the cold street. But right at that exact moment, the heavy double doors of the mansion swung open. A tall man stepped into the foyer. It was Roman Mercer, the reclusive billionaire tech mogul who owned the entire estate. He looked at his mother, then at the crying child, and his eyes turned to ice. What Genevieve did not know was that this tiny girl carried a secret that would completely destroy Genevieve's comfortable world within the next few minutes. Before we reveal the incredible truth behind Roman's sudden arrival and the secret the child holds, please take a brief moment to subscribe to our channel. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our daily stories of justice and family drama. Also, we love hearing from our community. Please leave a comment below and tell us exactly where you are watching this video from today. We read every single comment. Now let us continue with our story. To understand how Hazel and her little girl Lily ended up on the floor of a billionaire's mansion, we have to look back at the rules of the Mercer family. Genevieve Mercer was a woman who cared about only two things: money and social status. She had married into wealth decades ago. When her husband passed away, her son Roman took over the family empire. Roman did not just maintain the family fortune, he multiplied it by billions. He was a genius in technology and real estate. However, Roman was also a very private man. He rarely went to high society parties. He did not care about designer labels or bragging about his wealth. He worked long hours and preferred quietness. Because Roman was so busy running his global empire, he left the management of his massive estate to his mother, Genevieve. And Genevieve ruled the mansion like a cruel dictator. She treated the staff like machinery. She believed that poor people were inherently flawed and lazy. Hazel had arrived at the mansion just 6 months earlier. She was a young widow. Her husband had passed away in a tragic workplace accident right before their daughter, Lily, was born. Hazel was left with nothing but a mountain of medical debts and a sweet, energetic baby girl. She had searched for work for months. Finally, an agency connected her with the Mercer estate. The position was for a live-in housekeeper. The pay was modest compared to the family's wealth, but it offered a small, private room in the servants' quarters and meals. For Hazel, it was a literal lifesaver. She could keep her baby close to her while working hard to pay off her debts. When Genevieve first hired Hazel, she laid down one strict, unbreakable rule. "The child stays in the back quarters," Genevieve had sneered, looking at Hazel's worn-out shoes. "I do not want to see her. I do not want to hear her. If she steps 1 foot into the main living areas, you will be thrown out on the street without a single penny. Am I understood?" Hazel had nodded quickly, tears in her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. I understand. You won't even know she is here." For 6 months, Hazel kept her promise perfectly. Her days were long and exhausting. She woke up at 5 o'clock every morning. She scrubbed floors, polished silver, washed heavy linens, and dusted priceless antiques. While she worked, little Lily stayed in the small bedroom in the back of the house. Hazel had bought a secure playpen and filled it with soft, quiet toys. Whenever she had a 5-minute break, she would run back to the room to check on her, feed her, and change her diapers. Lily was an incredibly good girl. It was almost as if the infant understood that her survival depended on her silence. She rarely cried. She would sit in his playpen, smiling softly, playing with a small plastic blue car that had belonged to her late father. Roman Mercer was rarely home during these months. He flew all over the world for business meetings. When he was home, he stayed in his private wing of the house, surrounded by papers and laptops. Hazel had only seen him from a distance a few times. He seemed serious, distant, and deeply tired. Genevieve, on the other hand, was always around. She spent her days hosting charity luncheons with other wealthy women. She loved to brag about her son's billions. She acted as if she had earned the money herself. She would walk through the hallways with a white glove, looking for any speck of dust to scold the servants about. Hazel worked herself to the bone to ensure Genevieve never found a single flaw. She wanted to protect her job at all costs. But as any parent knows, you cannot control a toddler forever. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Genevieve was hosting an elegant tea party for the daughters of some prominent local politicians. The grand dining room was filled with the scent of expensive jasmine tea and costly pastries. Hazel was working double duty. She was serving the guests and constantly running back to the kitchen to wash dishes. Meanwhile, back in the servants' quarters, Lily was napping. Hazel had checked on her just 10 minutes prior. She was fast asleep, wrapped in her worn blanket. Hazel closed the door tightly, making sure the latch clicked. However, the old wooden door of the servants' quarters was warped from years of moisture. The latch did not hold securely. A few minutes after Hazel left, a loud clap of thunder shook the house. The sudden noise woke Lily up. She looked around the dim room. She was frightened by the thunder. She called out for her mother, but the house was too large, and Hazel was far away in the dining room. Lily climbed out of her low toddler bed. She gripped her favorite little blue plastic car for comfort. She pushed the bedroom door. To his surprise, it drifted open. The little girl followed the light. She walked down the long, narrow hallway that separated the staff quarters from the main house. She had never been allowed past the heavy oak door at the end of the hall. But today, because the caterers were moving back and forth, that heavy door had been propped open with a chair. Lily wandered through the doorway. She found himself in a magical world of bright lights, sparkling crystals, and beautiful colors. She forgot her fear of the thunder. She wandered into the grand foyer, her tiny bare feet making no sound on the massive Persian rugs. He followed the sound of women laughing. She walked straight into the grand dining room. The room fell instantly silent. One of the wealthy guests stopped mid-sentence. She pointed her manicured finger at the doorway. "Genevieve, dear," the guest said, her voice dripping with disgust. "What is that doing in your dining room?" Genevieve turned around. Her face turned bright red, then completely pale with embarrassment. There stood Lily, wearing faded pajamas with a small patch on the knee, holding his cheap plastic car. She looked up at the wealthy women with big, innocent brown eyes. At that exact moment, Hazel walked into the dining room carrying a fresh tray of silver teacups. When she saw her daughter standing there, her heart stopped. The silver tray slipped from her hands. It crashed onto the floor, sending teacups rolling in every direction. "Lily!" Hazel gasped, rushing forward. Before Hazel could reach her daughter, Genevieve snapped. The embarrassment in front of her high society friends completely blinded her with rage. She stood up so fast her chair flew backward. She marched over to the toddler. She didn't see a child. She saw a stain on her perfect reputation. "Your child doesn't belong here," Genevieve screamed at the top of her lungs. "How dare you bring this parasite into my dining room? Look at the mess you've made." Lily, terrified by the screaming woman, dropped her little blue car. It rolled across the floor and hit Genevieve's expensive designer shoe. Genevieve looked down at the toy as if it were a poisonous spider. She kicked it away violently. The plastic car shattered against the marble baseboard. "Get her out!" Genevieve shrieked, her voice cracking. "You are fired, Hazel. Pack your garbage and get out of my house right now. Both of you can sleep in the gutter where you belong." Hazel fell to her knees, sobbing. She grabbed Lily and held her tightly against her chest. The little girl was crying hysterically now, terrified by the anger in the room. Hazel looked up at Genevieve, begging with her eyes. "Please, Mrs. Mercer," Hazel gasped, sobbing. "It was an accident. The door must have opened. It's pouring rain outside. I have nowhere to take her. Please don't do this." "I don't care if it's a hurricane," Genevieve cold-heartedly replied. "Get out." The wealthy guests watched the scene with cold amusement. None of them stood up to defend the crying mother and child. Suddenly, the heavy front doors of the mansion banged open. Roman Mercer walked into the foyer. He was wearing his expensive tailored suit, but his tie was loosened. He looked exhausted from a long international flight. He had returned home 2 days early to surprise his mother. Instead of peace, he walked into a nightmare of screaming and crying. He walked into the dining room. The atmosphere instantly changed. The wealthy guests sat up straighter, smiling warmly at the young billionaire. Genevieve quickly changed her expression from rage to a fake, loving smile. "Oh, Roman darling," Genevieve said, her voice suddenly sweet as honey. "You're home early. Don't mind this little drama. Our clumsy maid let her brat wander into the dining room. I am just correcting the help and sending them on their way." Roman did not look at his mother. His eyes passed over the wealthy guests, who suddenly looked uncomfortable. Then, his gaze fell upon Hazel, who was kneeling on the floor, holding her weeping daughter. Roman's eyes drifted lower, looking at the shattered pieces of the little blue plastic car on the floor. Slowly, the billionaire's face turned completely white. The exhaustion vanished from his eyes, replaced by total shock. He stopped breathing for a moment. "Roman?" Genevieve asked, looking confused by her son's intense reaction. "What's wrong, dear?" "Don't worry. The next maid will be much better." Roman ignored his mother completely. He took a slow, trembling step toward Hazel and Lily. Hazel pulled Lily closer, thinking the billionaire was going to scold her too. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for his harsh words. But the harsh words never came. Instead, the wealthy, powerful billionaire did something that shocked everyone in the room. He dropped to his knees. He didn't care about his custom-made $3,000 suit touching the dirty floor. He crawled over to the shattered pieces of the plastic toy. With trembling fingers, Roman picked up the main body of the broken blue car. He turned it over. On the bottom of the cheap toy, scratched into the plastic with a pocket knife, were 3 letters. S. L. M. Roman stared at those letters. A single tear escaped his eye and rolled down his cheek. He looked up at the little girl in Hazel's arms. He looked at Lily's brown eyes, the shape of his nose, and the small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon just beneath her left ear. "Where did you get this toy?" Roman asked. His voice was no longer cold or powerful. It was shaking with deep emotion. Hazel wiped her tears, terrified. It belonged to my late husband, Silas. He had it since he was a little boy. He always kept it in his pocket for good luck. He gave it to Lily before he died." Roman let out a ragged sob. He buried his face in his hands for a brief second before looking back at Hazel. "Silas," Roman whispered. "His name was Silas?" "Yes," Hazel said, trembling. "Silas Mercer. But he didn't know his real family. He was raised in an orphanage." Genevieve stepped forward, her face full of annoyance. "Roman, what on earth are you doing? Why are you crying over a piece of cheap plastic? Get up off the floor. You are embarrassing me in front of my guests." Roman stood up slowly. The sadness in his face instantly hardened into absolute fury. He turned to face his mother. The look in his eyes was so terrifying that Genevieve actually took a step backward. "Silence!" Roman roared. The entire room shook. The wealthy guests gasped, clutching their pearl necklaces. "Roman!" Genevieve gasped. "How dare you speak to your mother that way? You want to talk about embarrassment, mother?" Roman said, his voice deadly quiet. "You just threw my niece and her mother out into the rain." The dining room became so quiet you could hear the rain tapping against the large windows. Genevieve looked completely lost. "Niece? What are you talking about? You are an only child." "No, I am not," Roman said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. And you know exactly what I am talking about, Mother. Roman turned to Hazel and offered his hand. He gently helped the trembling young woman stand up. He looked down at little Lily and smiled warmly, his eyes full of love. Hazel, Roman said gently, my father had an older son. His name was Silas. He was born before my father met my mother. When my father passed away 5 years ago, he left a secret confession in his private safe. He spent his whole life looking for Silas, but someone kept hiding the records. Roman turned his icy gaze back to Genevieve. My father left half of his personal fortune to Silas and his future descendants, Roman continued. But when I opened the safe after my father's death, the file containing Silas's adoption records was missing. Someone had stolen it to make sure nobody could ever find him. Genevieve's face drained of all color. She reached out to grip the table to keep herself from falling over. I hired private investigators, Roman said, taking a step toward his mother. For 5 years, I have been searching for my brother. The only clue I had was a journal entry from my father. He wrote that when Silas was a toddler, my father bought him a cheap, blue plastic toy car. My father used a pocket knife to scratch Silas's initials into the bottom. SLM, Silas Lucas Mercer. My brother was named after our father. Roman held up the broken blue piece of plastic. My brother passed away a year ago in a construction accident, Roman said, tears filling his eyes again. I found the accident report last month, but the company records didn't list his wife or child's current location because they had moved. I didn't know his family was living right here, under my own roof, being treated like garbage by you. Genevieve began to stammer. Roman, this is a mistake. This maid is a liar. She probably found that toy in a trash can. She is trying to scam us. You can't believe her. She didn't tell me this story, Mother. I found the toy myself, Roman said. And look at her. Roman pointed to little Lily. He gently pulled back the girl's collar to reveal the crescent moon birthmark. Our father had this exact birthmark, Roman said. I have it on my shoulder. It is a genetic trait of the Mercer family. You knew it, didn't you? You knew exactly who Hazel was when you hired her. Hazel gasped, looking at Genevieve in absolute shock. Roman stepped closer to his mother. My investigators told me last week that someone had intercepted the final location report of Silas's widow. The email address it was sent to belonged to you, Mother. You found Hazel first. You hired her as a maid so you could keep her hidden in the back quarters, away from me. You wanted to make sure I never saw the girl. You wanted to ensure they never claimed their rightful inheritance. Genevieve collapsed into her chair. She could no longer deny it. She had found Hazel and the baby 6 months ago. She knew the baby was her late husband's granddaughter. Out of pure greed and hatred, Genevieve wanted to keep the family fortune entirely for herself and Roman. She figured that if she kept Hazel as an impoverished, overworked maid in the dark corners of the house, the truth would never come out. But she hadn't counted on a heavy thunderstorm, a broken door latch, and a little blue plastic car. The wealthy guests in the dining room began to whisper loudly among themselves. They were no longer looking at Hazel with disgust. They were looking at Genevieve with absolute horror. The grand matriarch of high society was nothing but a thief and a cruel liar. One by one, the guests stood up. They did not say goodbye to Genevieve. They grabbed their coats and hurried out of the mansion, eager to spread the shocking gossip to the rest of the city. Within an hour, Genevieve's social life would be completely ruined forever. Roman turned his back on his mother. He looked at Hazel, his eyes filled with deep respect and apology. Hazel, Roman said softly, I am so deeply sorry for how you have been treated in this house. You are not a maid. You are my sister-in-law. And this little girl is my niece. She is a Mercer. Hazel was crying, but for the first time in a year, they were tears of relief and joy. I don't know what to say, Roman. I never knew about Silas's father. Silas always thought his family didn't want him. Our father loved him very much, Roman assured her. And I will make sure you and Lily are taken care of for the rest of your lives. Arthur walked over to the house telephone on the wall. He dialed a number. Hello, security? Roman said firmly. I need 2 guards in the grand dining room immediately. Genevieve looked up, her eyes wide with fear. Roman, what are you doing? I am your mother. You stopped being my mother when you decided to abuse a widow and a helpless child for money, Roman said coldly. 2 large security guards entered the room. Roman pointed at Genevieve. Pack Mrs. Mercer's personal clothing, Roman ordered the guards. She is no longer allowed on this property. She has 30 minutes to leave. If she ever steps foot on this estate again, call the police for trespassing. Roman, you can't do this to me. Genevieve shrieked as the guards gently but firmly stood her up. I have no money of my own. Everything is in your name. Then I guess you will have to learn how to live like the people you despised, Roman replied without a single ounce of pity. Genevieve was led out of the mansion, crying and screaming, completely stripped of her wealth, her status, and her family. The mansion became peaceful once again. The storm outside began to clear, and a beautiful ray of sunshine broke through the clouds, lighting up the grand dining room. Roman knelt back down in front of Lily. He picked up the broken pieces of the blue car and placed them gently into his pocket. I will have my finest engineers fix this toy for you, buddy, Roman told the little girl with a warm smile. And tomorrow we are going to buy you 1,000 more. Lily stopped crying. She looked at Roman, blinked her large brown eyes, and reached out her tiny hands. Roman happily scooped his niece into his arms and held her tight. Hazel looked at her daughter in the arms of the billionaire. She knew their days of hiding in the dark, scraping for pennies, and living in fear were finally over. They were finally home.